lovely to see so many people whose names we recognise. Thank you very much for coming today. If it's helpful, whilst people are just joining, to say again, just to emphasise, this is a session where we're doing very little speaking. We're going to be listening. It's about how we go forward as two co-ops. When we started, both co-ops were innovators in the community energy sector. Westmill Wind was one of the first community-owned renewable energy projects in the southeast of England, and Westmill Solar, we believe, was at the time the world's largest community-owned solar project. So we've been an innovative, and both co-op boards have been talking about, well, what do we do to remain like that? We've built our co-ops on the efforts of others, and we want to continue to do that. We asked people in the survey, and I think over 90% of people said, don't just continue, we'd like you to continue and do other things. And so what we're doing here is asking people for their views. We have some thoughts ourselves, but it is genuinely about a cooperative and democracy. So we are incredibly fortunate in having Doug Parr and Angela Bryant, directors in solar and wind and solar, who will start that conversation by giving us a view about where we may be more widely in the next decade, and then we will open it up for people to start giving their views about what are the sorts of things we should start thinking about. So I want to stop there and allow time. We will finish at 10 o'clock and give everybody a break, and at 10:15 we will have our keynote speaker. So with no further ado, can I pass over to Doug and Angela, please?
I could just jump in. I think we've reset to the gallery view. So if you'd like to just see the person who's speaking alongside the slides, it's the same trick as we just did in the main room. You click on the view button and there's an option that says speaker view.
Which will then allow us to see the slides that Angela and Doug have prepared in advance.
Okay, are we good to go? Are people happy?
Yeah.
Right, I am going to share my screen and show you some of the slides just to kick off the discussion, really. And so, as Mark says, we can hear from you. So first off, can everybody see the cover slide there of long-term strategy?
Yes.
Great, and that's presentation mode. Let me know if it stops. I have been on one or two occasions where people got to slide 19 before realizing people couldn't see anything but the first slide. Okay, so as Mark said, a few intro thoughts. And I thought it'd be good to kick off with the context of where we are now. Because when the Westmills were set up in 2008, 2012, the situation was very different. Renewables, wind and solar were quite new and not very common. And that has changed because I just went into the stats from the government to see how things have changed, and the as you'll see from how things have changed, we started out when wind was first commissioned with just 1.9% of the Great Britain's electricity generation being wind and solar. Last year it was 28%, and from the Climate Change Committee forecasts, we can expect it to be over 60% by the end of this decade. And those make a very marked difference for the context in which we're operating. First of all, wind and solar generation in its own is not new. And secondly, it will also affect market conditions and the prices that we can get for generation. Now, those changes are coupled with the decarbonisation, are coupled with other changes going on, which are sometimes referred to as 3D: decarbonisation, decentralisation, and digitisation. Decentralisation is that generation doesn't need to be big centralised power plants, you know, your big coal, your big gas, or your big nuclear plants anymore. It can be quite local. Westmills are an example of that, in fact. Where generation is quite local, and it can be local to the point of actually being just on people's roofs. Electrified heat and transport, there's going to be a lot more electric vehicles and heat pumps, we think. Further, coupled that decentralization with digitization, where everything is smart, that allows flexibility, so your car will charge when there's lots of renewables available. Even your fridge might go on. Industries will switch on and off depending on the availability of variable renewables like wind and solar. And it adds up to a very different system that we'll be moving into when we have to make some big decisions about what happens to the Westmills going forward. So as Mark said, when the Westmills began as pioneering, as both a co-op and developing new wind and solar, that was a new thing. It's not so much now. And the support that both the co-ops have got is going to come to an end. And what happens then? Refer back to that slide I mentioned about how much wind and solar is going to be available. It means not only is it not particularly pioneering, it also means that the prices that we get for bulk generation of wind and solar power are probably going to be a bit lower, which we haven't seen coming through yet, but I think it's widely anticipated that that will be the case. So the boards have started to look at their way forward. Here is a slide that I should have introduced myself as Doug Power. I'm on the Westmill Wind Board, but I have shamelessly taken this from some of the thinking that the solar board were doing about, well, what can we do that's going to be different? And these possibilities that you see in that diagram form the basis of the survey that I hope many of you kindly participated in. And all options were supported, in fact, pretty much overwhelmingly, although the strongest support was for new renewable generation and future revenue streams. And we are definitely very much thinking about that. So how do we adapt to the new situation? Well, the boards are obviously looking after their own co-ops, but they're also cooperating and are trying to put together some ideas about how to take things forward. And so I've put together what I've called elements of a possible new strategy for when the support for renewable power directly comes to an end. And for the wind farm, that is now in less than 6 years' time. So we do have decisions to make. Firstly, we are already working more closely together. For wind, there's the question about whether to have a life extension, in other words, try and maintain the wind turbines and keep them going, or whether to repower, in other words, to put new, different turbines up there. That would be quite an involved proposition. Not clear that it actually makes sense, but anyway, it's something to look at. Can we get income from flexibility? You remember I mentioned about flexibility being an important part of the new system. Are there income streams? Well, actually, there can already be income streams at the moment. And how could we exploit them? Could we do it with, for example, a battery or some form of storage on site? Could we add value to member supply? So members will be going on the journey, just like everybody else, to electrification of heat and transport. Can we do something to supply them directly, or by setting an example to them on their zero carbon journey. So all of those we are currently thinking about. Some of them are already in process, like Leo, as I mentioned. So that's what we're thinking about at the moment. And so the next thought is, well, we'd like your thoughts and comments. Do you agree with the vision? Do you think this is the right way to approach it? Are we missing anything, or are we going in the right direction? And at that point, I will hand back over to Mark. You're on mute, Mark.
I know, sorry. Thank you very much. That was really a helpful introduction. And really for me, what it illustrates is just how different the electricity system, which is of course part of the energy system, is likely to be in a very, comparatively short space of time, compared with where it is now and compared with what it is when we started. Just before I open up and to get people's views on that and the questions that people have posed, you talked about the battery and the possibility of a battery. And I know that Adam Twine has been working incredibly hard. There's a separate community interest company that's been working on the battery, and I can't see him for a second. But if Adam, if you just want to very briefly give a minute or so on what's happening, and just to check, Angela, did you want to say anything as well?
No, I'm all good. Doug has done the
good, right.
The honours.
Thank you. Adam, I can see you there. So
hi, Mark, thank you very much. Thank you. So it's not just me, we've set up years ago, which I think we've addressed the AGMs in the past, the community storage and smart grid project, CIC. And the good news, 2 years ago, I think, was it 3 years ago at Steam, we said we thought we were working with a developer, which never came off. However, we have recently, thanks to the effort of other members of the CIC, we've secured a just under 40,000 quid grant from the Rural Community Energy Fund. So thank you very much to them. And that's to do a feasibility study, which we hope to be doing in the next few months. And that will give us a sense of a very in-depth sense of what the options are for Westmill for a battery storage. We're looking at 3 megawatt. That's what we have a grid connection offer for at the moment. The grid connection offer is very expensive and complicated, but we're hoping, possibly through Leo or through other mechanisms, that we may be able to work through that, because otherwise it won't be commercial. But it's what we're looking at the moment. We see it as the logical next step for Westmill, because going forwards, as Doug mentioned, we have to do, we have to look forwards, and this would be a way of further enabling decarbonisation to really work on a community, in the local community. And we also hope it may tie with an EV charging station on site as well, but that's sort of, that's quite a way down the pipeline. Thanks, Mark. I'll shut up there, but thank you very much.
Thank you. So we've given a lot of talking there. It's the opportunity for people now to raise questions, make suggestions, because we do want to hear what members' views about the future might be. I don't know if it is worth, Doug, if we were able to, if you could share your screen with that sun picture, that might just help people look at the different dimensions of the things that we have looked at. So that might just remind everybody of some of the areas that we're looking at there: services, community fund, looking at our capital, looking at generation, looking at sustainable lifestyles. There's Nina, did you want to come in there?
Yes, thank you. I've just seen there's a chat question. Ian Byrne has said, does local need redefining? In 2012, it was a 50-mile radius. And so he, in Milton Keynes, counted as local. His question is, that's not really local community. Obviously, this is something we've looked at from the point of view of the community funding. So for a lot of the projects we're looking to fund, we're now talking about sort of local region being either our county, which is Oxfordshire, For our kind of local environment, we've got a thing set up with a 25-mile radius, which is well into Wiltshire, takes in Swindon, and little bits of Berkshire and I think Gloucestershire on the other side. We had particular postcodes that were roughly in a circle for the bond issue, but that was again a slightly different definition. And now I know that from the survey, there's a number of members suggested that because they're not local anymore, do we really have to focus so much of the funding around our site? If they've got great projects around where they're living, could they champion those and get some funding? So I'm quite interested in people's views on that kind of mix of how much do we do locally to the site and how much perhaps would you like to do locally to particular members. So it'd be great to hear thoughts on that too.
Okay, that's really helpful. And Nina, who's very modestly talking about that, has done the most incredible amount of work looking particularly on the solar side at what sort of community benefit we should do, and we have some that's local, some regional, some national. In fact, we do support some international projects as well. I've got 3 people who've raised their hands. I shall take them in the order that they appear on my screen. So the first person, if you can unmute yourself, is Sarah James, if you're able to unmute yourself. And then it will be Alex Allison, then Nicola Graves, and then Anthony Woolhouse.
Hi, thanks, Mark. So I had a look at this yesterday, and I had quite a few ideas, and I perhaps should say, for the benefit of everyone else in the workshop, I'm a trustee with Westmill Sustainable Energy Trust, and one of the things that's particularly unique and innovative about the Westmill co-ops is that they started and they fund Westmill Sustainable Energy Trust, which really acts on that aspect of community engagement, education, letting more people experience and know about renewable energy through Westmill sites. So obviously I did look at expanding community impact side. I think something that we do need to look at is the education side reaches a broad range of people, but when people visit the site, they're probably quite self-selecting. And I think we could do a lot more to partner with different organisations to invite different kinds of events that attract a different group of people who aren't necessarily looking for a wind farm or a solar farm to come to the site and almost accidentally experience Westmill through doing that. And I noticed also you've got encourage member involvement on there, and I would like to encourage all members. WEZET could really use your help and involvement, particularly to guide people on the site. If you're not confident in sort of delivering a tour, although we provide plenty of support and training on that, also just helping show people around the site, just supporting someone who is giving a tour and looking after people. And we increasingly get requests for visits from things like film crews that also need support to be able to go on site. So we'd really welcome engaging a lot more co-op members in our guide and other volunteer roles.
Thank you very much. So what I've written down there is look at education, look at ways in which we don't just have people who've self-selected, but look at widening the number of people. Thank you very much, Sarah. So moving on, Alex, then Nicola, then Anthony, and now we have Colin as well.
Hi, good morning. My name's Alex Alliston. I live in Gloucestershire, so I'm just about in the local radius for Westmill. 2 observations, one about local. One way of benefiting local people is to supply electricity directly to the local community. Now, I know that you've got the rebate scheme operating, managed by Octopus Energy, but there's another model which Energy Local have pioneered, which is effectively connecting people on the local distribution network directly to your local generator and managing that all through smart metering. As you mentioned, the future of the grid is going to be decentralized and smart. So I think there could be an opportunity there to set up an Energy Local club or something of that nature. So I'm just wondering if that has been considered at all. The second observation is on the future of the hardware. I'm a mechanical engineer and I used to be in renewable energy business. There's a lot of money being spent on the infrastructure of putting the Westmill wind farm, and it seems to be a no-brainer to extend the life of the project beyond the original 20 years, because you've sunk all that cost and you've sunk all the embodied carbon in manufacturing the products, pouring the cement, laying the cables, etc., etc. So provided the certification society is happy with the structure and the manufacturer is happy with the fatigue life of the components, I don't see why repowering is not an option, and it shouldn't be a sort of high cost option for the site. Sorry, not repowering, extending the life. Repowering, as you said, Doug, is a completely different question because it really is decommissioning everything and putting something new up, and that's a whole new project effectively.
Okay.
I certainly support extending the life if the certification societies are happy with that.
Thank you very much for that. I will. That was really helpful. I'm getting an increasing number of people, so I will perhaps cut people a little bit short to make sure everybody else can get in. We are certainly looking, just to say, at whether we can extend the life of the project. We've got a planning application ready to go, and we're also working with BVG Associates and Energy for All to look at the long-term financial model. And if it looks like it is viable, then we will be consulting with our members about whether we can do that. So at the moment, we're working up that business case to see if it is sustainable. And in fact, when we get to the AGM, you'll see we're asking to put some money into reserves. Part of the reason for that is to allow us the flexibility to do that if it is viable. I'll take the next on my list. No, there were a couple of questions just by chat. I mean, I think there's one there on sustainability of the 12% return. I think that's probably, if I could say, maybe a question for the solar AGM rather than this and the future there. I mean, what solar have actually proposed a fairly significant increase in what they put into the development of their co-op. And just to answer the final question that was raised there, I think one of the things that the cooperative energy octopus model does do is start to give us flexibility to look at other sorts of ways in which we work with our members about local energy supply. So what we're doing now is a first step. It's not the end result. Could I go to Nicola next, please?
Hi.
Hello.
I'll just open my video here.
That would be lovely.
Yeah. Okay. So yes. So yeah, I've been interested in all these questions, and oh, I know what's happened. It's over there. That's why it's not. Yeah. So, but my question, or my comment, my question is of a different nature, which is to do with our responsibility, our global responsibility to Gaia and to humanity. And I did send these questions in, but rather late yesterday. They are about, where we get these minerals from, which companies. Obviously, a lot of the mining companies have allegations against them in terms of human rights, not respecting the places where they are being mined. And this, I think, is very wrong. And to put it in context, because the whole idea of decarbonisation is thinking in terms of climate change and being responsible on the planet. And I think I would like to see Westmill have a wider view of responsibility, as I say, which is ecological and human rights, which is where we are sourcing things from. This obviously goes into what Alex was just saying then, or was it, you know, as somebody else, yeah, about the embodied carbon. But also, yeah, so what would happen, where, you know, what is the lifetime of the panels, and what, you know, and of the mines, and what responsibilities the companies have for putting things right, what, you know, these minerals that are precious minerals, of which, you know, the planet has a finite amount. We have to be considerate of those things. I mean, that's basically my point. And my question to the board is to what extent they are going to take this greater responsibility into account in terms of decisions in the future. I would also, I live in Hove actually, and I would very much like to be in a local community, Westmill community, you know, hoping that we can actually meet, and you know, we are starting to be able to meet down here, even though we're not near the site, and then maybe a group of us would come up and visit. That's also.
Thank you. Nina may want to make a comment, because in fact one of the things that Westmill Solar has done is support Brighton and Hove Energy Services Company, the earlier supporters of that. I think you're right also to talk about responsibility. One of the things that we are careful viewers of Ethical Consumer, for example, and you know, a number of questions were raised about, you know, who do we sell our electricity to? I wonder, I know that Mike Blanche is on this breakout session, whether you would just be able to say a little bit about the payback of the wind turbines. But to take your broader point, absolutely, I think we do see the importance of sustainability beyond just low carbon. So I take your point and agree that.
Yeah, very briefly, I mean, as the carbon footprint of electricity is coming down, the carbon footprint of manufacturing full stop is coming down,
yeah,
which is partly why we should have manufacturing in this country and not rely on other countries. But the other thing to say is that wind turbine manufacturers are some of the greenest companies in the world, and they have all got targets to have zero carbon by times like 2035 and things like this. They already have a very low carbon footprint, and green steel is one of those things. How can you make steel that's green? In terms of the ethical sourcing of products, I'm not sure where that fits on the wider agenda, but it's something I've noted, and we'll ask the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to keep moving. So we have Anthony, Colin, Vivian and Ian who have raised their hands in different ways. So Anthony, did you want to welcome and raise some points with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly.
I'm impressed by this long-term strategy review, but I have 3 points to make. I'm very interested in the refine the capital structure, because I don't know quite what's envisaged there. I'm also not sure about the future revenue streams. I know that Project Leo is looking at flexibility, and I'm aware of those projects, but there may be other revenue streams that you're looking at. And I can only endorse that there's lots of wind farms that have been replaced with fewer but much larger wind turbines, or there have been planning applications where lifetime has been extended. So that's almost like a no-brainer.
Thank you. I'll try and answer the first of those, and I might ask Doug if he wants to make any comment on the second two. In terms of the capital structure, what does that mean? we started with over 2,400 members. We now have 2,200. And when we did our original offer, we said, give us your money for 25 years and we'll give it back and we'll give you a return and help do something about climate change. Clearly, if we extend our life, many of our members have said, look, you know, I can't hold it for another 15 years. So in effect, we're looking at a move to a more permanent type of cooperative structure. And one of the things there is people are able to redeem their shares if they want to. People can transfer them and have always been able to do so. But also, we want to then look to encourage new members. And one of the things that we did, I'm a solar director as well, and we did with solar a couple of years ago was encourage people to take out a bond, but also to become a shareholder with one share. And we specifically said, we want to get more people, we want to get younger people, we want to get local people involved. And that goes back to the points made earlier about linking so that we actually have a very local membership as well as people who are further away. So and again, that's something we will consult on as we go forward. But in a sense, it's something we want to do, but it also flows from us having a longer term vision for the co-op. Doug, did you want to add anything?
Well, yes, thanks, Anthony, for that question. So the future revenue streams, we don't have a full map of them. What I would say is that there are already, I think, 7 flexibility and balancing markets that are run nationally. Through Project Leo, we've got one of the consultants looking at whether the Westmills could play in about 3 of them. I have some skepticism about that, to be honest, but certainly they've done the work, and we're looking for a date to find the results, so we can view the results. There would be a considerable enhancement if we can get the battery project to stack up in relation to wind and solar in the local conditions. There's also further ahead, which we haven't looked at yet, but are nonetheless real, is the possibility of wind and or solar bidding into the capacity market, because wind farms have now started to get revenues from that stream. So what that means is, you end up with a series of revenue streams that don't just start just for generation of power and the assets on the site, that aren't just about selling power. They're about other things that are being offered to the grid. And that's before we get into kind of other options of kind of member involvement and the flexibility of somehow connecting our own members with the generation.
Thank you very much. Colin, did you want? I've got you there. If you're able to, thank you.
If you can hear me, I'm able to.
Yes, you can. We can hear you perfectly.
My concern is whether a co-op is a vehicle that can raise sufficiently large sums of money to make a real difference. We're invested in investment trusts and the like, where there's no fudge around it. They're there to make a return for their investors, whilst investing ethically, and one can exercise a degree of control there. But once you have a cooperative, of course, if you put more money in, you still just have the one vote, so you don't have that control. And the cooperative can then, forgive me for using the term, meander off into areas of social contribution. And for instance, I'm at South Marston, which is towards Swindon. But once you start contributing towards the efforts to raise standards within areas of Swindon, that could take a lot of money, and they would be very worthy projects. So my concern is that as we go forward, if these projects are likely to require significant capital, I suggest that significant capital will have to come from people with more money than others, I put it like that, in order to make a significant contribution. So those able to contribute 5-figure sums rather than the lower sums. And there has to be a certainty of return, I suggest, on that money. For instance, if we want to invest it for our grandchildren going into the future, so that we have a fair idea of what's going to happen. quite accept that you can't control the price of electricity and that sort of thing, but a degree of certainty of return would be appreciated.
Okay, thank you for that. I will, the next person on the list is Vivian, and Vivian, and that's a useful perspective. I wanted to invite Vivian to join because he may also have a perspective on this. And then it will be Ian, and then it will be Jill. Vivian. I can't hear you, Vivian. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. I'm Vivian Woodell. If you've read my election statement, you all know probably some of what I'm going to say. But I strongly believe that the board is moving in the right direction on this. I think that the original concept, and it's understandable why it was set up like this, that you have basically the co-op is a wrapper, almost built by engineers rather than by entrepreneurs, if you like, to hold the asset and then be decommissioned at the end, isn't the way to solve climate change in the long term, because a co-op is an enterprise, and an enterprise should have a longer perspective than that. And of course, 25 years ago, it seemed like a long time off, but it's coming up now. And I think, you know, we're going to need more electricity in the future, not less, because of heat, you know, the growth of electric vehicles, electric heating and so forth, replacing fossil fuels. And although some analysts are predicting that electricity prices will fall, I'm a little bit skeptical about that, because we're going to have quite a bumpy ride, I suspect, as fossil fuels, there's less investment in fossil fuels, and there'll be more demand for energy, particularly electric energy. And therefore, I think we might see prices going up rather than down, but we'll see. So I support what the board is doing to extend its life. I also think that we're right to be capping the interest rate and putting funds into reserves to handle some risks, because we should be taking on some risks, being innovative. That's one of the things we've got the freedom to do. And, you know, in a way, I think we should be considering, we should have been doing the battery project ourselves. We shouldn't have required it to be outside the structure. Ideally, it would have been one co-op rather than two. We've made our structure more complicated than it needed to be, and maybe we can fix that in the future. But and I think we're right to be investing some of the surplus cash in other co-op projects. So it's great to hear that solar has been doing that. But I think that we could support the growth of the sector by doing that. Climate change is not fundamentally a local issue. So I think, although that it's great that there's a local focus around this, and that has helped overcome what might have been opposition to building these projects, we shouldn't be too parochial in terms of the projects we take on. Question was raised earlier about the ethics of the supply chain. My view on that is, if we have a clear choice and we can do it, we should make the more ethical choice. But we only have a certain capacity to analyze these things. So if the information is not easy to interpret and understand, then it may be beyond our capacity. But we should do it if we can. And I think Colin's question at the end is a very interesting point. My view is that it's not the co-op structure that is the obstacle to raising capital in itself. It's the fact that it's hard to put money from conventional tax wrappers that most people with some savings have their money in, like pensions and ISAs and so forth, into co-ops. It's great that there's a little bit of flexibility now with the innovative finance ISA, and we've seen Westmill Solar moving quickly to exploit that. I think we should see more of that, and we should try to find ways to encourage more routes for that kind of capital to come into a co-op. But I don't think we should give up our co-op structure, and I disagree that the one member, one vote is a problem. I think that's a strength. I don't think that we'll meander off into things we shouldn't be doing. That's about us getting together and agreeing our purpose and our focus and our strategy together and sticking to it. And if we need to change it, having a proper debate about it. It's not about having control in the hands of the people with more money necessarily.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Mark, could I
yes.
just bring in the point about why we chose the co-op structure? This goes back to the original Baywind days. Baywind was the first community-owned wind farm in the UK, and they didn't want to go down the PLC route. They wanted a more local feel, about ownership, and they also followed the structure that occurs in Sweden. You have hundreds of turbines in Sweden that were cooperatively owned. So that's why we started with a co-op. And I agree, one member, one vote isn't a problem.
Yeah. And I would just add that, you know, co-ops do form substantial parts of the economy. If you were to look at Denmark, where much of the domestic heating is actually provided by co-ops. And in fact, what's very interesting is watching an emerging decarbonisation in the UK. And yet, actually, the danger is that it's not a democratic one. And a personal view from me for a second is that you're starting to see house builders selling the option to provide monopoly collective heating to financial companies. So it becomes an asset class that you trade, so that when you move into a new block of flats, you can only use the collective heating chosen by somebody at the maximum price. And you know, that's the sort of the opposite of something that's democratically owned. But
sorry, Mark, can I move on? We're running a bit short.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got two more people. So Ian and Jill. So Ian first.
Yes, good morning.
Hello.
Briefly, I support the two co-ops working together. I support Sarah James' comments earlier. I thank Mark for warning me in advance that I'm probably in a minority view, and that's not, I don't worry about that, because I've been involved with renewables and energy efficiency since 1985, so I'm used to being not in tune with common feelings. My concern is long-term looking at how we are going to actually exploit renewables in a cost-efficient way so that consumers are not going to face much higher energy bills, electricity bills rather, and also we will increase fuel poverty. So my starting point is to let's look at the load factors for renewable energy. And for the last year, 2019, which was a normal year, solar PV had a load factor of 11%. This year's record is 12%. Onshore wind average was 26%. This year it's 20%, another record. Hydro 30% for us, that is. Hydro 36%, bioenergy 63%. Now, I have no doubt we can meet all these problems by looking at energy demand solutions and also by energy efficiency. My concern is that if you've got such low factors, then it's not going to be it's going to cost money, because you'll have to build more storage, more capacity problems will arise. That's why everyone is so excited by offshore wind. It's achieving load factors around 40%. So the higher the load factor, the less you need in all these other mechanisms. So otherwise, renewable is free at or very low cost when generating, but the capital costs are really going to make things so attractive that it won't really be there. We will definitely need more storage and demand, don't get me wrong, but we should be focusing on trying to maximize the load factors. And perhaps this tidal streams, which looks an ideal community project for me, that's being piloted in Orkney and Jura, those could, all being well, will have more than 30% and be highly predictable. You'll know when they're going to come on. So I think we need to think wider. And I don't think, and this is the bit that's not going to go down well, I don't think that the Westmill site with 12% load factor for solar and with 20% load factor for wind is the place we should be actually trying to do new things unless there's breakthroughs. So I'm all keen to keep this going, but let's not get obsessed about sticking with a very poor wind site and a not too clever solar.
Thank you very much. I had asked if Doug would come back, but I think with the time, I'd rather, I think that's very clear, but I'd like just to get the time so that Jill can ask the last question. And then I'll just quickly go to the chat to make sure that there's nothing that we've missed there.
Got about 4 minutes left.
Jill.
I'm one of the original investors and I'm now nearly 70. I joined in the long term originally. Now I cannot invest for the long term again. I need an ethical investment which is viable, as Ian is talking about, and is helpful to the whole system as well as the local community. So I'm sure I'm not the only one. Some people will want to donate their money. Others need their money back. Others want a shorter term solution so that and I would like a system whereby people can invest for the shorter term, an ethical investment to generate energy. I don't know whether this site is the best. If this wind farm can be bettered elsewhere, I would support that. But we do need to look realistically as well as emotionally at solutions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's very clearly put. And one of the things that solar has done actually is to offer people the opportunity to make shorter term investments. Alan Mould has asked, I put it on the chat, oh sorry, it's just moved, put it on the chat, but asked about the opinion of retaining money in order to fund future projects. Is that still part of the board's thinking? Yes, it is, but we will consult with members before doing so. The point about tidal stream is there. Annette, have I missed any of the questions on the chat?
I don't think so. I think you've picked most of them up.
In that case, it is 10 o'clock. Thank you, everybody, for taking part. If there are points that you wanted to raise and haven't been able to do so, please email us. We will continue to listen. That's one of the points of this. We have reached the end of the session, so thank you all very much. We have a 15-minute break, and at 10:15 we have our keynote speaker.